Well, Nick, thanks for joining us today. Super excited to have you on. Really excited for the content that we're going to dive into. And a large portion of our show is going to be focused on, partially because of the season, but benchmarking your 401k retirement plan and 401k retirement plan transitions and some of the unexpected things that can come up during that process. So really excited to dive into it. I thought a really good starting point for us today would be helping our audience understand the difference between what a record keeper is and what a TPA is, their respective roles, bundled versus unbundled. So go ahead and kick us off.
Yeah. So the different roles, when you have a 401k, it could be really complex when it comes to the roles, or it could be very simple. So when you talk about a bundled provider, it's probably as simple as it gets. When it's unbundled, that's when it gets a little more complex. You're dealing with more hands in the pot, I guess, is what you would probably say. So with a 401k plan, you have assets, you have funds, and you need a record keeper to manage those things. So a record keeper is one part of the process. They're a pretty important part because that's also going to be the same provider that you'll go on the website, pick your elections, all that stuff. That is your record keeper. But then on an annual basis, if your plan's qualified, which most of the time we're going to talk about a qualified plan, I think, in this context, but you're going to have a TPA, a third-party administrator that manages the plan, that does the administration. They test the plan each year. Every 401k plan needs to be tested. And they'll set up the plan documents. So they'll manage the plan documents. Every 6 years, a plan needs to be restated. So they'll restate the documents as well, based on the IRS language. So language changes sometimes. And then with Secure Act 2.0 or Secure Acts that come out, they'll adjust certain amendments and do certain amendments for plans that need to adhere to some legislative changes. So, and then the third one, and this is not something a lot of people think about, there's a custodian. The record keeper always deals with the custodian, but the custodian is where the actual money is being held. And you see the daily trading in there, but your record keeper will show that on their website. That's kind of their job. So the actual money is being held at a custodian, but your record keeper is going to manage all those things and actually show that money correctly, and then all the trades and all that stuff.
Yeah, excellent. So just a high level recap here. A record keeper, that's going to be the interface that you as a plan sponsor and someone who's offering the plan is going to log into to see staff members, their elections, investments. And it's also where participants are going to receive statements from, where they're going to call into, view websites and retirement planning tools on. So it's kind of, like the face of the plan, if you will. And then, sometimes there's a compliance entity also connected to the plan, and they're, looking at IRS regulations, various rules and regs, and making sure the plan documents are current and that there's appropriate testing taking place within the plan. And then the key difference between bundled and unbundled is, the unbundled, we have, the record keeper and a third-party administrator, right? And they're each filling their respective roles. And a bundled is where a record keeper is also, incorporating that various compliance components to running the plan.
And those two roles are brought together.
Yeah.
So it's a one-stop shop is the slang term for it. Yeah.
And, so being in the industry, I think you and I have both seen like pros and cons to going bundled versus unbundled. Would love to just get some high level thoughts on your perspective, and, would love to add some commentary to it as well.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I think the industry's changed a lot since 401ks have come out. So, I mean, the big draw for having a bundled plan is hopefully it's a good provider. It's a good tech provider that is offering a service called 316 Fiduciary. They're going to be in charge of like the notices. They're going to file the 5,500 and then also do the testing and deliver the results each year and help you come up with a solution. So that's the big draw of being bundled. And a lot of tech providers do come up with a solution for that, and it's great. And there's tech providers that work really well with advisors as well, that are kind of helping manage and bridge that communication gap. Unbundled, I think the draw is like you can have your record keeper, and if you have a really particular set of investments that you really want, if you really love this certain record keeper or TPA that you've been kind of communicating with and have a relationship with for a long time, you can keep them. And the third party, there's some record keepers that will just be like, we don't care what the plan provisions are. We're going to record keep those. We're going to show all the money. And then the TPA manages all the stuff when it comes to the provisions, all of like managing like the testing, the special provisions that come with like the exclusion of compensation. You can get really complex with a 401k plan. So having it unbundled, there is more flexibility with a plan document generally. But some of these tech providers are getting very flexible as well. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think those are all really excellent points. And, I've seen bundled 401k plans that are serviced very well. And I've seen other cases where, unfortunately, the compliance team with this bundled record keeper, they have way too many plans and like they're just really falling behind, and like the compliance component isn't being served well. And on the flip side, like I've seen third party administrators where the caseload for your average administrators is quite high, and so it's not they're not quite necessarily as responsive. But I think that is kind of an excellent assessment. And like regardless of which route you go, I think you have to be confident in a team. Right. Whether it's, bundled or unbundled, like, if you reach out and you have questions, you should be able to get to a compliance person who's able to help you address your question in plain English. I mean, like this industry is super technical, and it's quite easy to get lost in the sauce quite quickly. Right. So, as you're, thinking about the different directions, I think having that confidence in the team is should be something that is ranked higher, right? And maybe you pay a little bit more for it, but at the end of the day, what is the value of your time worth, right? And that's something that you have to think about. And you don't necessarily, if you've never managed and run a 401k program before, that's not necessarily something that you're aware of. And it's only when you're knee deep in compliance questions or you're like, oh shoot, I need help.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And speaking the language it's hard to do, right? It's hard to track like all this terminology. So yeah, hopefully, when you're selecting a 401k provider for your business, you're also looking at people that can do the job well, but also are down to earth and can kind of manage some of those, like speak in plain English, because I can get caught up where I'm just like using too many acronyms and I'm like, oh right, let me break this part down for you a little bit. Yeah,
totally. So. Yeah, and the other point that I'll make to this is that I think business owners, when they think about a 401k plan, it's kind of easy to get caught up in like, hey, I'm buying a product. And it's like, yes, in a way you are, but you're also engaging in a process.
Yeah.
So it's not just, a set it and forget it type deal. Like this is going to be a living and breathing plan that helps support you, your team, and evolves as your organization grows and changes. So you have just to be able to, exactly, just like health insurance,
right? Health insurance, yeah. It's a similar thing. It's a benefit.
Right.
So that is solely wrapped around money too, at the end of the day.
Totally.
So, so there's a lot of regulations behind money.
Yeah. Exactly. So, transitioning our conversation a little bit further. So, let's say you're a plan sponsor, business owner, or HR professional, and you've kind of interviewed, and you're not super happy with some different providers. You're not super happy with your existing program. Like, take us through some of the bumps in the road that can happen when you're transitioning an existing program out to a new program.
Yeah. You want to talk about benchmarking?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Let's take a step back. Let's dig into that benchmarking process. Heck yeah.
Yeah. So I can speak about the fees, and Dominic, how often should a plan benchmark? I'm trying to remember that.
Yeah, no, that's a super great question. I mean, I think the Department of Labor has a general guideline of every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And I would add to this that if you have a substantial change in your organization, so let's say, you started your business and on the onset you had 3 employees, and then, 2 years down the road, you end up having 50 plus. Well, that massive change in demographic can really warrant a new benchmarking, process and evaluation of your current, 401k supports. Probably when you had, the 2 or 3 employees, what you were requiring of your retirement plan partners is going to look very different with 2 to 3 employees versus 50, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is if the assets within your 401k plan have changed substantially. So let's say you as a business owner, you had an old 401k plan and you forgot about it, and then 12 months in, you're like, oh wait, I have this other plan, and you decide to consolidate it and roll it into your current 401k program. That could also be a really good trigger point to go through this benchmarking process. The other thing I'll say is, if you're having ongoing issues with a particular party, don't wait, don't limp along, right? You gotta dive into it and address it.
Yeah. And some things are mendable when you're with a provider. I mean, whether it's certain, missteps or service things, but if it's really bad, it's probably time to reassess and see, because there might be some other solutions out there that can really make your life a lot easier. And that's probably why I bring up the tech 401k side, because it can make things a lot easier. So some of the things to think about as far as the financials go, your plan is feed. It has fees kind of broken down into a few categories. So let's talk about on the company side. You will have direct billables sometimes where there's either a monthly or an annual fee. So we talked about unbundled plans. So if your plan is unbundled, that direct fee is probably coming from your TPA, most likely. And if it's bundled, you might be getting a fee to the company. Now, you might look at your statement and be like, wow, well, I never get any fees. I'm not paying them at all. Well, that actually brings me to the next point of, and by the way, the direct fees too are broken down between sometimes a base fee, like a company fee, just this is what we're going to flat charge you for the year or each month. And then per participant. So either per eligible or per participant, that person that's putting money into the plan. So if you're not getting any of those fees, that's fine. But there's another element to it that might be that your 401k provider is making money off of you somehow, right? So you got to look at the asset-based fees. So there's some fees that come out on basis points, right? As far as a flat rate basis points on an annual basis. So you see upwards from 50 basis points to I've seen 75 basis points, 100 basis points. I've seen some crazy fees, and sometimes when they're not billing you directly, they're gonna probably upscale what they're charging you on the assets. So that's the money in the plan, and that's charged on a quarterly basis, usually, generally. So it's good to look at those things. You have the IRS requires a 408B2 to be processed by a provider that's providing a financial services such as this. So that means that 408B2, that report shows all the fees broken down on a company level. So what are we charging you for the services? So you could have that flat rate asset under management fee, or it could be charged sometimes out of funds. So if there's proprietary funds or if there's different types of funds, sometimes those fees come out of there. So that's on a fee standpoint. That's kind of the basis. So you're either going to be directly billed or you're going to be billed out of assets. That's at the end of the day, those are the two things.
Right. If I could jump in real quick, there's a couple things I'd love to define for our audience. Basis points is equivalent to the overall percentage of the cost, right? So 100 basis points is 1%.
Mhm.
And then, the other thing, oh man, I'm sorry, I lost it, but I'll come back to it.
Probably, yeah, bring it up later. But
Yeah.
I think I had another point too on the fees. But I think just to bring up again, if you're unbundled, it's really good to get a statement from your TPA, because sometimes people get surprised by how much their third party administrators charging them on a annual basis, especially for testing weird stuff. 5500 filing, which is something they'll charge a separate fee sometimes just for that service.
I just remembered the other term that you mentioned, proprietary, right? So
Yes.
yeah, certain mutual fund companies will also have a 401k record keeping platform, and so what they'll do at times is feed in to the 401k plan a requirement of using a certain percentage of their funds. And that is, considered a proprietary fund offering because it's, part of the same entity. So as you're looking at different record keepers, that is certainly something to be aware of. Some record keepers have a percentage that you have to use. Other record keepers require you to use the target date funds. As a QDIA, qualified default investment alternative. So a participant doesn't end up making an investment election. This is the fund that they'll be defaulted into. And other record keepers have no proprietary requirements, right? So just kind of understanding like the overall flow of the different requirements is very helpful at the very onset of the relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So did you want to talk about kind of the transfer too, like when they decide on, or is there any other elements to the
I mean, I think the other thing that is typically part of a 401k team is a 401k specialist, right? And so an advisor, has different choices, typically in how they bill for their services. Sometimes it, falls into an assets under management fee. Other time it's a direct billable to the employer. So that is, overall part of the equation too. One thing I will say that is super important that the DOL explicitly states is you don't have to be using the lowest cost provider. You just need to be able to justify and say, hey, yes, the costs that are part of this 401k program are reasonable. And so, I've seen situations where, it could, you could absolutely be getting a quote unquote lesser cost program, but there's significantly less supports. And that can lead to some really poor outcomes, right? So it's just being able to have this process to look at the different providers, look at what you're receiving, how your staff is being supported, the quality of the fund lineup, and having being able to justify that the actions you're taking is reasonable.
And that is a good point. I nerd out a lot, so I'll go on websites every once in a while. There's one in particular for ASPA. It's just where I got my QKA out of, and they posted an article just about Costco actually, and there was kind of a class action suit against Costco from one of their employees, and it was in regards to their 401k plan. And to win something like that, it has to be very blatant that the plan just hasn't been looked at as far as fees. So that a part of that lawsuit, and you can look it up. This is public information, by the way. It's not like some insider information. The biggest thing is the fees. That was like the big thing. And
for that particular lawsuit, right?
Particular lawsuit, the fees, and then also the fund elections was, I guess, okay, but it was more so like the fees associated with the funds as well. So it's just good to dig into all those things and just kind of step back every 3 to 5 years and take a look at what those fees look like.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the issue with that Costco case, to add a little more color commentary, is like if you look at the size of the plan, right, and what the advisors on that plan were charging relative to some of the peers for that size plan, it was significant. And then the plan sponsors weren't evaluating the share class of the funds that were in the plan. meaning that they could have negotiated and obtained funds that had a lower overall cost, but retain the same exposure. And so I think that was kind of the crux of the biscuit for that lawsuit.
Yep, absolutely.
You want to pivot over to looking at some of the unexpected things that can come up when you're transitioning a 401k program?
Yeah. So you've selected your provider. And then in this context, let's just say it's a bundled provider, just for simplicity's sake. So you selected a provider that will handle the TPA work as well as the record keeping as well. So you're getting ready to transfer your plan. Things to think about is the timing of the conversion of assets. Let's start there. So generally there is always a blackout window. So blackout period is generally the time for that record keeper to coordinate with the other provider, transfer the money over, and then during that window allocate assets. So as you're onboarding, and that process, by the way, takes about 60 to 90 days. So as you're onboarding with your new provider, just kind of keep that in mind, that's going to be the timing. You can start your contributions generally early, but things to think about is, do you have outstanding loans? Like, does your employees have any outstanding loans? If they do, we want to load those loans in early, so that those payments switch over. If you're switching payroll providers, for instance, or keeping the same payroll provider, what is the process for uploading those contributions at your current provider? Are you uploading a payroll journal each payroll period? Payroll journal meaning like an Excel spreadsheet, right? For those contributions to be processed. Does your new payroll provider have integration with your current one? That's also something to think about as well. There's a lot of providers out there that can provide integration. What I mean by that is integration just means, in a general standpoint, it means no touch for you. So each pay period, you're just processing payroll, and all those contributions that are being deducted out of your employees' paychecks are being contributed into your new provider as well, automatically, without your intervention. Good to double check and make sure everything's kind of aligning. Okay. But that's what integration is. So that's another thing to kind of think about. So you get to the point where you're onboarded, you've decided, what your first contribution date is. What also a part of that onboarding process is to look over your plan documents. So plan documents, meaning what are your current provisions under your IRS plan document? Those provisions outline, like, if your plan is safe harbor. So if you're doing a promised match, like a basic safe harbor, right, or an enhanced safe harbor between 4% and 6%. If you're not doing a match at all, maybe it's time to start thinking about those things. So it's use your new provider to kind of guide you into some different decisions. If you want to, one, retain employees, right? So, having a match is a good retention tool, as well as a vesting schedule if you want to add that in, and profit sharing too. So when the end of the year hits and you have a surplus of money, you can actually use that to as an owner. Sometimes you can max out depending on age and all those variables, but it's a discretionary thing that you can add into the plan. So you do a document review. So then you've settled on all those things. You've settled on your first contribution date, and then now we're heading towards asset transfer. So your current provider is going to be coordinating with your prior provider during that time, and settle on transfer dates. So once those dates are settled on, you're going to know when that blackout period starts, and then you'll have a wire right after that. So it's going to be the bulk of all the assets all together. So what transfers over is everything. So what you're currently doing with your plan as far as an asset transfer goes is everything's going to be transferred over. So all your current employees and all your terminated participants. So with your terminated participants, if there's any terminated participants that have assets in the plan, they will be transferred over as well. So all that money is going to come over, and then all the historical information. So whether those employees are contributing to Roth, pre-tax, how much match they've gotten over the life cycle of the plan, and with them being in the plan. So then we also want to talk about how that money comes over. There's a few different ways. Generally, the most popular way is to do a cash re-enrollment. So that is a trustee to trustee transfer. The assets get liquidated, and then the money gets wired over to the new provider. And then participants re-enroll. So they get to know the new system. Some providers offer enrollment meetings for employees for them to kind of think about the benefit, think about if they want to contribute into the plan this time, right? Like if they've kind of been putting it off, it's a good time to rethink about that. As well as if you have an advisor, to utilize your advisor for those enrollment meetings as well. So that's one way. So that's a cash re-enrollment is kind of one term for it. Another way is a mapping strategy. So you map everything over. Basically, if you're going to do mapping, you want to do a full mapping. So that means deferrals are mapped over. If you have auto enrollment, who's opted out of the plan, as well as fund to fund mapping. So if you have certain funds in your current plan, and then you've selected new ones for your new provider, we want a strategy for how that's going to be mapped over. Beneficiaries is another thing that you'd want to think about being mapped over. So with mapping, you always run the risk, like they're going to jump in and re-enroll anyway, and that's okay. But if you want, there's certain advisors out there that really like the mapping strategy, and that's okay. It kind of alleviates some of the confusion from participants. So you can do what's called partial mapping, where you're only mapping over deferrals, and then everybody kind of that doesn't make an election, they'll go into, Dominic said this earlier, the QDIA. So they'll just go into whatever fund is defaulted in the system. And then the last strategy that's like not really that popular, it's called an in-kind transfer. Money never leaves the market, so it never gets liquidated. It's basically just a light switch that the funds stay in, and then they kind of just get reset to your new provider. So kind of just like almost a name change. So those funds just sit in. It's really hard to coordinate because sometimes a lot of the times when you're choosing a new provider, there's new funds. So it's hard to do an in-kind transfer that way. So I've only seen maybe a small handful of those in my time, like about 10 years of doing this. I've only seen a tiny bit. Wow. So you're going to either see the cash re-enrollment or the mapping. So yeah, that's a lot. I know that's a lot of information, but those are the three big options.
No, absolutely. All those are super, super helpful. And I think really an important discussion point, and your advisor should be kind of leading the charge on this. This is not necessarily something that you as an owner or HR director or, CFO should really be heading. This charge should be led by your advisor. What your advisor should be doing is looking at the current demographics and health of the participation of your plan. So if you've been working with this advisor a long time, and let's say deferrals are high, there's good amount of employee appreciation and engagement surrounding the benefits, like that's a perfect case, in my opinion, for mapping, right? It's like, hey, we've got a good thing going here. Like we don't want to confuse participants, as you mentioned, like deferral rates overall look good. A lot of people are on track for retirement. People are taking advantage of the matching, etc. That's perfect time for mapping. But if you haven't had that same level of engagement or enthusiasm or surrounding the benefit, doing that re-enrollment, I think, is a really great opportunity to really re-educate staff members, get them engaged, help them understand the benefit. And again, this is where working with a really great advisor comes into play. They should be helping you lead the charge when it comes to education. Yes, you need to be present. You need to be kind of involved and providing feedback to the advisor. But that advisor should be leading the charge, because participants inherently are going to have questions about the investments, about how much they should save for retirement. And you as an owner or CFO, HR director, like I'm assuming you're not licensed, right? And so you should not be creating that liability for yourself, right? You should be deferring that liability off to a specialist who has license and who has insurances, and educating and guiding your staff members on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And on the re-enrollment side, just to kind of reiterate, like you will have a new platform to like mess around with. So
Totally.
So there's just new places to go and select things. It is a great time to kind of think about like, oh my gosh, I've been contributing 4% or 2% or whatever. You're like, I'm going to go bump it up to about 6 or 7 and see what happens. And it's a great time to think about those things.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting things for me as 401k specialist, as I've seen just how big of a difference there can be on these online platforms in terms of retirement planning tools. Right. And like some platforms are more basic, more bare bones of like, hey, this is how your investments are expected to grow. And like, there's not a lot of calculators. There's not a lot of tools. There's not a lot of opportunity for people to do what if scenarios. And there's other platforms where it's a lot more robust, where you can connect not just, your 401k plan, but your other various accounts and see your household money flow. So, going through that process and running an effective education campaign can be absolutely life-changing for an organization and a lot of, your employees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
One thing I did want to circle back to in terms of the terminated participants, one of the provisions that is allowed is if a participant has under a certain balance, you as a plan sponsor can do what's called forcing them out. Can you take our audience, through that process, what that is, and kind of some of the details of those thresholds?
Yeah. So under $7,000, you can what's called force out your employees or force out those terminated participants with that lower balance to clean up the plan. So under 7,000, the assets will go into an IRA, generally, like an IRA that your provider has, or they may have a program, but they'll guide you through those things. So it'll roll out into an IRA. I believe it's under 1,000. They can actually cash out to those terminated participants. So one thing to kind of just make generally known is when you do transfer over a plan and you do have those terminated participants, your provider may ask you, hey, we don't have this census information for them. We need you to provide those things. And that's
when you say census information, you mean emails, phone numbers, addresses, right?
Yes. So like they'll probably have the socials, but social security number, address, last known address at least, and then emails, all those things, just so that they can be put into the system and have an account for them to for the money to be allocated to them. So to be able to force them out, we also need that information as well. Having that balance. And so if it's under 1,000, then we can also actually cash them out. There's notice requirements, like there's like a 30-day notice requirement to process them out. And that's why also it's really good to really be choosy about your provider, because there are providers out there that will do automatic force outs. That's just a part of their system. They'll just automatically force out employees on a quarterly basis, I believe, or an annual basis. But it's a good provision to have, because then it also brings down the participant count down when you're looking at 5,500 filing. If you're a large company that's at 120 employees, and then you have a lot of people with small balances, you can bring that number down and then not be a large plan filer if that's something that you want. So it's a good tool to have.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think once a year is a really great, cadence to looking at the terminated participants within the plan. If there's any participants with a balance of under $7,000, going through that process of forcing those participants out. Kind of a pro tip here. Record keepers, will typically price the cost of their services based upon the assets that are in the plan overall contributions into the 401k plan and the number of participants.
Mm-hmm.
So reducing the number of terminated participants that are in the plan, not only does it reduce your administrative burden and your annual ongoing requirements, to provide plan notices, etc., but it can also be beneficial in helping to reduce the overall cost of the plan. So, when I'm looking at, engaging with a new retirement or new organization, they have a retirement plan that they want me to review. And let's say, I can look at the demographics of the plan, the platform, and I feel it makes sense for us to transition the plan. That is one of the first things that I'll do before getting pricing for alternative record keepers, because I want to try to get the best price possible before moving the plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And and the 5,500 filing goes along with those numbers. So the fees, the fees alone for some of these providers, that they pay. So that definitely cleans it up a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the other things I think plan sponsors should be aware of when considering moving a plan is market value adjustments, right? Can you kind of take us through what that is and where that can apply from a high level perspective?
Yeah, high level is probably as best as I can get. But what I understand with these stable value funds, sometimes it's also good to look and see what kind of investments you have, because you may have employees in some of these guaranteed income funds. So you have a stable value, guaranteed income. Sometimes annuities fall in this category. So these are all funds that have their own separate contract. So what you're essentially doing when you invest into like a stable value fund is you're locked into an interest rate or a percentage. And so when you're transferring your plan over to a new provider, that contract breaks if they don't have that stable value fund at the new provider. So you face a couple avenues. Sometimes there's nothing that needs to be done. They're okay with liquidating. Maybe the contract's like done, or maybe there's a provision in the contract that's okay for you to get out. But generally what I've seen sometimes with these stable value funds is the interest rate or kind of where they're at in the interest rate, there needs to be what's called a market value adjustment. So there's a fee associated with that. That's kind of your contract break fee as well, kind of lumped all into that. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple ways to handle that. Sometimes the company covers that fee for those participants in there. Generally, it's pulled out of the assets, and that's applied there. And so that's the market value adjustment. Or there's another way to handle it that these providers offer, where the money stays where it's at and then it just starts sifting over a 5-year period of time. That's called a put. So those are the two things. But guaranteed income funds and stable value funds, those are like generally when you see those MVAs.
Totally. Apply. Yeah, no, I mean, a good 401k specialist will be able to spot that and help communicate and help you as the plan sponsor understand the pros and the cons of the different choices. If it can be avoided, you'll be able to review the contract with you and build an overall strategy. I've seen cases where when you're moving the plan to a new record keeper, you can communicate what's, the stable value or the market value adjustment to the new record keeper. And sometimes the new record keeper will help absorb some of those costs. Right. So there's quite a few different ways, as you outlined, to address that. But that is definitely, I've seen in certain cases can be a bump in the road to making a transition.
Yeah. Just one of those things to look at. So you definitely should be notified. If that comes up. Yeah,
absolutely. Excellent. Well, what else? Anything else that we should cover today before we wrap up?
We covered a lot. Transfer of a plan, financially looking at overall at a plan. I mean, transferring a plan over seems daunting, but if you have a good provider and a good advisor with you, every step of the way. I mean, it's just a paperwork comes up one day, you kind of look at it, and then hopefully your provider's kind of explaining what's being thrown at you. But just know that if you choose a good provider, they're going to guide you through those things, and then it'll be over before you know it.
Yeah.
So
totally. Yeah. I think, the one last thing that I would add to benchmarking is when you're looking to transition the retirement plan, Nick, you did mention reviewing the plan provisions and the plan documents. If it's been a good period of time since you reviewed the provisions in your plan or the averages within the industry, like it could be this, a really good opportunity and also create some excitement about the new 401k program. And so if your goal is to, hire and retain, more employees, like we can go so far and I have industry reports, like look at industry averages for your average company match or your average company profit share or the average vesting schedule. Right. And you can, gradually position your plan to be better than the industry average. So when your HR person is like going through the hiring process and they go through the benefits with potential candidates, like they can demonstrate, the commitment that the organization as a whole to wanting to retain employees for the long term. And that can be a very constructive conversation to have. Another thing that I've seen is, certain employers will know whether an employee is going to be a good fit earlier on, and other employers need to wait about a year, right? So looking at eligibility provisions, and being able to identify when that tipping point, on average is, and then adjusting the 401k benefit so people can participate, as soon as possible, but you're not creating a whole bunch of terminate participants within the plan, right? So I think that is like another thing that is very important in this whole process, and definitely something that, a good specialist should be leading the charge on and communicating with you about.
Yeah, one thing I'll suggest too with starting a plan. So we covered transitioning, but when you start a 401k plan, I would say with the eligibility. So how long the waiting period is for your employees to be able to jump in and start participating. I would say this: constrict first and then relax later.
Sure.
So, if you're a restaurant that has a lot of 18-year-olds, 16-year-old, whatever, that are working for you, and you're like, dude, they're not going to participate. Start with a year, maybe year and age 21 type of provision, and then if you start seeing how your staff wants to participate, start relaxing later. You can always amend the plan and make things a little bit easier to get in. But it's easier to relax things later rather than constrict things. Totally. And if you do decide to do something like immediate for your first plan, I will say if you amend the plan and you started like, everybody just waits a month to get into the plan, and then you constrict it later for you do 6 months or something. It will only apply to those employees hired on or after the date of the amendment. So that's why it is a little bit of just to keep that in the back of the mind. It's better to keep it a little more strict and relax later than the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. No, another thing that does come to mind, if you are, new to starting a 401k plan, or going to be starting a 401k plan in the next year or two, based upon the growth of your organization, with Secure Act 2.0, automatic enrollment is one of those requirements. And this is where it is super important to have that payroll integration. You mentioned payroll integration earlier in the conversation. I personally am a huge fan of payroll integration, just because it helps automate a lot of systems. Like you're not having to put the burden of tracking employee eligibility onto an HR person, right? And the payroll vendor and the 401k vendor should be communicating upon your behalf. And then, as an employee is approaching eligibility, they're able to provide 401k notices, packets, materials to the participant. And, if the participant doesn't make, a proactive election, then they'll be defaulted into the plan. So making sure that you lay that foundation and there is that integration can be super, super helpful to the overall efficiency of running a compliant retirement plan.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. Well, loved our conversation today, Nick. Thank you again, as always, for coming on. Your insights and expertise are, very much valued and appreciated. So To our audience, thank you for sticking with us, to this point. And if you do have any questions, let us know. Certainly always happy to support and do what we can to help you run an effective 401k program for your organization.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks all.